about effective leadership, it's not about applying the same approach to everyone. It's about knowing what someone's ready for and then leading accordingly. And that's where the clinical thinking and the clinical skills really can quietly change everything. In therapy, readiness is everything. In leadership, we often ignore it. We try to be a fair leader. We treat everyone the same. We push for growth. And then we wonder why people stall or disengage. I think that readiness is really one of the missing key leadership skills. When I think about therapy and a client comes in, we never assume that the client is ready to deal with whatever it is that they're coming in with. They may come in and go, "Hey, Jules, I want to deal with this thing that's happened in my life." And I go, "Hey, okay, that's great. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about what life looks like for you. Let's talk about some of your resources and your skills and the things that you have that help you function in day-to-day life." We're assessing their capacity. We're assessing their stability. We're assessing their ability to tolerate emotions and experiences and all of these other things that may come up, to tolerate conflict. I'm looking at the context of what they're sharing. Leadership often skips this step entirely. I have a need as a leader. I expect you to fill it because it's your job. We roll out the same expectations, the same process, the same feedback, the same pace, and then we act surprised when people disengage. We're trying so hard to be fair leaders that we actually miss the point completely. Good leadership isn't about the consistency of our approach, it's about the accuracy of our approach. When treating everyone the same feels fair, leading everybody the same is often ineffective. In therapy, clinically, we learn that fair does not mean identical. Support must actually be responsive. It's not uniform. It's not straight across the board. What Joe needs is not necessarily what Sally needs, which is what Akeem needs, which is what Susie needs. In leadership, different people need different levels of structure. They need different timing. They need different boundaries. They need hard deadlines or soft deadlines. They need different parameters, different kinds of support. This isn't playing favoritism. It's not playing favorites with your team. It's about being attuned to your team, what your team's needs are, what their skills are, how their brain works, and how they operate. Fair leadership isn't identical leadership. It's responsive leadership. When we push people too fast, it backfires. When I think about therapy and people coming in and, they want to just get to it and they want to, process through all the yucky stuff and get to the other side. What happens is that there's this internal resistance that pops up. They want to work through it, and then, we bring it up, and then all of a sudden they're like, I don't feel anything about it, or I can't think of it, or I feel disconnected, or all of a sudden there's this other thing happening in my life. There's this resistance that shows up, and not intentional resistance. It's just this internal resistance of like, this feels like a bit much right now. I'm not quite ready. My nervous system isn't quite ready to deal with this. People experience shutdown. It's like all of a sudden they don't feel anything. They feel neutral, they feel numb, they feel tired, they feel blank. I don't know. It's one of the most common things we hear in therapy. Sometimes when we push too fast, there's this rupture, there's this fracture that happens in the therapeutic relationship. And that happens because the client isn't ready yet to work through whatever it is that they're coming in with, even though they're saying that they're like, yes, I want to do this. But as soon as we introduce it and we start to move in that direction, if there's this fracture and this rupture in relationship, all of a sudden they shut down. In leadership, the same thing happens. We find that performance drops, accountability gets confused with pressure, people disengage quietly, and leaders often misinterpret this as a motivation problem. But we often know that clinically, it's not a motivation problem. It's often a capacity problem. Pressure without the readiness doesn't create growth. It actually creates protection. It creates this hypervigilance of what's coming next. I don't know. I need to put up all these barriers and all these walls to protect myself because now I'm sitting in this hypervigilant space because I'm getting pressure, but I don't feel ready to actually deal with this yet, or I don't feel ready to engage in this project. And so we're setting our team up for failure. They're not going to be able to operate optimally because the pressure doesn't suit the capacity that they're at yet. When we start to lead for capacity and not for compliance, things start to look different. Compliance looks good short term, right? It meets our KPIs, our numbers look good. However, capacity is what sustains the performance. We're looking at short term versus long term here. I tell people all the time, baby steps are much more sustainable than big steps. It's the same concept here. Therapy trains us that we need to build tolerance. We need to do lots of those baby steps because those are sustainable over time. We start to build the scaffolding. We have to learn to walk before we can run. We build on skills. We teach these foundational skills around language, emotions, feelings, their body, what they think, what they know, the difference between emotions versus thoughts versus feelings, and how to respond versus react. We scaffold growth for our clients. We actually get the opportunity to do the same thing for our teams. We learn to adjust the expectations over time. And we find that leadership that ignores the capacity piece often creates fragile systems, high turnover, quiet resentment, and teams that feel very dissatisfied. But when we as leaders start to understand the readiness piece, we start to ask questions. We maintain curiosity with our team. We start to gather feedback, and we provide a space where we can gather honest feedback versus just filtered feedback that our team feels like they need to give us to make us happy versus the authentic, real feedback. We actually start to create a better culture with our team because we're building trust, we're building safety within these parameters. When we do that, we actually retain people longer. Our people actually want to stay with us because now there's trust built. And we are able to start to grow teams that don't collapse under stress because we have managed teams and we've built teams and we've built the capacity to be able to manage the stress that's coming. Leadership that chases compliance sacrifices capacity. When I think about leadership as a whole, it's not about lowering our standards. When we think about capacity versus compliance, it's not about lowering our standards. It's about scaffolding and sequencing growth for our team. When I look at therapy, it teaches us that timing matters. Context matters. People are not always interchangeable. And leadership is actually the same, whether we want to admit it or not. And so the timing matters for our team. The context matters for our team. The capacity matters for our team. And our team, as much as, we may be able to hire somebody with the same skills, and so we go, oh, well, somebody's replaceable. The person that's showing up on our team is their own unique individual with their skills, education, background, way they think, the way they show up, how they interact with others. And so just replacing someone doesn't mean that they're actually interchangeable. And so we need to start to recognize what this looks like and the influence that this has on our team when we approach it from that idea of people are just interchangeable. When I think about questions I ask myself, as I sit back and I reflect as a leader, as a boss, as a manager, as a therapist, a friend, I start to ask myself, who am I leading as if the readiness piece doesn't matter? And what would I change if I slowed down to assess it? And that's a question that I have to sit with because I have to evaluate each person on my team and go, am I leading you as if readiness doesn't matter? Yay or nay? Okay, and then I go through this practice with each person just in my own reflection. And if the answer is yes, then I need to do some more reflection and start to change the way that I'm leading them. Strong leaders don't just know what they want, they know what their people are ready for. And that's a skill that we don't talk about often enough.